So there's a story about, I guess they call it rabbinic logic. This, I guess it's an old story, but you haven't heard it from me in a while. So there's someone who wants to find out about rabbinic wisdom and rabbinic logic. He comes to the rabbi and says, "Can you please explain it to me?" And the rabbi says, "Well, it's kind of complicated the way rabbis look at things." And the guy says, "Well, can you give me an example?" And the rabbi says, "Okay." So there's this chimney, and two guys go down the chimney to clean it. And when they come down the bottom of the chimney, one of them is his face is covered with soot, and the other one isn't. So the rabbi says, "So who cleans his face?" And the man says, "Well, that's easy. The guy whose face is dirty cleans his face." And the rabbi says, "No, you're wrong." He says, "What happens is the man whose face is dirty looks at the man who's clean and figures that his face is clean. So but the man whose face is clean looks at the other one whose face is dirty and figures his face must be dirty too. And so actually the one whose face is clean is the one who washes." And the man says, "Wow, that is intelligent." And the rabbi says, "Wait a minute. So let's try. Are you ready? Two men clean a chimney. They come down. One of them's face is dirty. Who washes their face?" And the man says, "That's easy. The one whose face is clean washes it." The rabbi says, "No, no, 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 no. What happens is the one whose face is clean sees the one whose face is dirty, and he says he figures his must be dirty too, so he washes his face. The one with the dirty face says, 'Why is the guy with the clean face washing his face? He must have seen mine. So I'll wash my face too.' So both of them wash their face." And the man says, "Boy, that's really interesting. Uh, try me one more time." And so the rabbi says, "All right. Two guys go down a chimney. They're cleaning the chimney. One of them has a dirty face, the other one doesn't. Who washes their face?" And the man says, "I got it. They both wash their face." The rabbi says, "You're wrong." He says, "How can I possibly be wrong? You told me that the one with the face with dirty and the one without the face dirty, and they look and they see and they both wash their faces." The rabbi says, "No, you're wrong." He says, "How could I possibly be wrong?" He says, "Because there's no way that two people go down the same chimney and only one gets dirty. They're both dirty." So that kind of story, it's not as old as, it wasn't given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai. But it is based on, it's a caricature, but it's based kind of on the way that rabbis look at things. They look at things, and there's actually an expression from the Talmud. Hofech v'hofech ba. Turn it over and turn it over because everything is in it. Take a verse of Torah, and these are the words that God gave us. And if you look at them and look at them closer, you'll find more and more things and deeper levels, more interesting ways of looking at the story. Kind of like you look at the other one and the face is dirty. It's a little bit deeper level of the story. But this isn't just a joke. This is, you can look at Torah and turn it over and find all kinds of things in it. That's particularly true for a line in this week's Torah portion. It's in Ki Teitzei. And it says that, I'll read the line for you. If you see your fellow's ox or sheep go astray, don't ignore it. You must take it back to your fellow. So that seems sort of simple, right? Like if you see if you see an animal that belongs to someone else, you can't just ignore it. You got to bring it back. It's a statement about what's it talking about? It's talking about you have an obligation to return lost property. It continues a little bit further, and we read it a little differently. If your fellow doesn't live near you, or you don't know who owns these, the cattle or the sheep, you shall bring it home, and it shall remain with you until your fellow claims it. Then you shall give it back to him. So this takes it a little bit deeper level. If you don't know whose it is, you can't remain indifferent. On a little bit deeper level, you have to take the animal home with you, and you have to care for that animal. And so there's a layer here, not only of returning lost property, there's a deeper level of we need to care for animals. We can't just leave a domesticated animal to fend for itself. And you have to, and what if the guy doesn't come for a day or two? There is no limit on how long you're supposed to have it. But that animal's got to be fed. Well, you got to feed it. And there's poop to be cleaned. You clean up the poop. You take care of that animal. This is, when you look at it on a deeper level, this is becoming quite an obligation. What started off as just returning something that's lost, now it is something that really encumbers quite a bit of your life. You now have this animal to take care of. You're obligated to take care of the animal. And so it shifts the focus now, not just on taking care of animals, but on who really owns the animal. Certainly you don't own it. This concept of finders keepers, that is not a Jewish concept. Maybe you think, well, the person who owned it originally is the owner and you got to return it to that person. But if you're going to be holding it for a long time and caring for it for years and years, well, maybe you're caring for it not because of that person who initially purchased it and neglected it and left it somewhere. But maybe your caring for it is caring for the true owner of that animal. Maybe that is the way you show your love for God, by caring for God's creatures, for things in God's earth. That's a whole different level. Wow, we're not doing this to return an item. We're not just doing this to be nice to animals. We're doing it, and it can be a big deal if it's a long time. We're doing this to show that we care for God and God's creation and God's world. And that has a lot of ramifications. If you see pollution, something gone astray, you've got to return it to the way that it was. If an environment, like if a forest is lost, you've got to return it to the forest. You've got to return it to the right owner. That's really interesting concepts. We're talking about now a real obligation to care for the earth, to return it to the way it was. But the line continues, and there's deeper and deeper. Let me tell you, the Talmud goes into this line like you wouldn't believe how much stuff is written about this line. You shall do the same if you find his donkey, the same if you find his garment, or you shall, so it's not just these couple of animals, any animal, or anything that's of value. And garments were very expensive in the ancient world. And so too shall you do with anything that your fellow loses and you find. You must not remain indifferent. Anything that they lose. That's a big word. Anything is an awful lot of stuff. What if a person lost their direction? Well, you've got an obligation to return their direction to them. What if they forgot who they are? They forgot their identity. Well, you have an obligation to return it to that person. And that's a really big deal. What if someone gets really mad at something? You remind them, this isn't who you are. I've known you for a long time. This isn't who you are. You're not the kind of person who gets mad at stuff like this. You're the guy that focuses, or the gal that focuses on the positive. Remember who you are. I'm going to return to you. I'm going to return your personality back to you. I'm going to remind you as to who you are. I'm going to return it to you. What if they lost their values? You're going to say, well, these were values you used to have. I remember it. Remember when you used to fight for these things? Remember when these things were very dear to you? I'm going to return those values to you. Anything that they lose, you've got to return. So what does that say on a deeper level? That says that we're really responsible for each other. That what someone has, regardless of what it is that they have, we all have a shared responsibility for it. It could be their values, their personality, their kindness, their love. What about someone with dementia? They lost their memory. You shall do the same with anything your fellow loses and you find. You remind them who they are. Did you cry for the movie The Notebook? Did you see that? It came out a few years ago. It's a pretty good movie. I don't want to, well, I guess I'll give it away. I guess I'll give the movie away. There's an old man who visits in a nursing home, and he reads a book to a woman. And she's a little out of it, but she likes hearing the book. And in the end, the book is about two young people that fall in love. And in the end, it's revealed the wonderful secret that this book was written by her. It's a diary of her life and her love with this man, and she forgot it. And that notebook is the only way to return her memory to her, to give her back who she is and to give her love back to her. If someone loses something, you have an obligation to return it to them. You must not remain indifferent. We all have an obligation to remind each other who we are. What if a country loses its values? What if there's a country that goes astray? What if? What if? At what point would you say, no, this isn't, we've lost something? At what point do you say that? At what point do you return those values to the country? Do you think this speaks to that? Do you think that this speaks to just people, or do you think it speaks to a country as well? I think it speaks to a country. I think we've got to return things that are lost. This is a very, very huge concept. And if you turn this concept over and turn it over and turn it over again, you will find some of the incredible wisdoms that our ancestors wanted us to inherit. Turn it over and turn it over, because everything is in it. And if you think that this line is ended, a little later in our Torah portion, it says, remember it says anything that belongs to the owner, you need to return to the owner. You shall not turn over to his master a slave who seeks refuge with you from his master. If there's a slave that's running away, you are obligated to not return the slave to the master if that slave is seeking refuge. What does that tell you about who owns the slave? Does that tell you who the real owner of that slave is? It's interesting, right? You don't catch it the first time, but you got to turn it over a bunch of times in your head. You got to read it over and over again. He shall live with you in any place he may choose among the settlements in your midst, wherever he pleases. You can't not sell a piece of property to someone. Every community and anywhere where you live is open to this person. You must not ill-treat him. Wow. These are really, really old words. And if you read a summary of it and you say, oh, yeah, you got to return lost property. If you read a summary of it, you miss a wonderful journey. You miss an incredible gold mine of knowledge, of wisdom. Pearls, diamonds are there about not just what it is to return someone's property, but who really owns the property and what our obligation is to the world and what our obligation is to each other. I think that's part of what they say when they say that Torah is like a pomegranate. It's got all these beautiful seeds in it, all the 613 seeds. But if you take any one of them into your heart, the whole tree will grow. If you take just this one concept of returning something that is lost, the obligation to return what's lost, you can't remain indifferent. If you just take that one concept to heart, you could live a very, very noble life. And all of Torah can grow within you. That's the way rabbis look at that's rabbinic wisdom. And we have the benefit of someone saw something and wrote it down, and then someone 500 years later read what they said and said, "Ooh, that makes me think of this," and someone else said, "Ooh, that makes me think of that." That I don't know that this is unique to Judaism, this kind of in-depth looking at things, but I will say that Jews have the biggest unbroken heritage of writing things down and looking at the same thing and finding depth and depth in it, turning it over and turning it over because everything is in it. That's kind of why we come together, because you like to see each other. You like the music. I get it. I like the music too, and I like to see everybody. But there's something incredible about these words. There's something different about it. These words are different than other things, and they contain wisdoms that we are all the inheritors of. That's why we have a congregation.